Mr. Moderator, it's all yours.
Well, over to Jerome.
Right. Good evening, everyone. I want to start off this session, this first of a series of panel discussions entitled Resistance. I want to say a special welcome to friends abroad, people outside of Trinidad and Tobago who are listening to us and who will be joining us later on. A little bit about myself. I'm a lecturer in the Department of History at UWI St. Augustine, and I have been involved in some activism, and not political activism, but more dealing with the issues of masculinity and gender relations. And this forum, this panel discussion is, I'm hoping it will be a voice for us, a vehicle for expression, for exploring societal issues with a view to building human consciousness. So we could engage in critical thought. Critical thinking is sometimes absent. We like to criticize, but that often is not critical thinking. We want critical thought about those things that fundamentally impact our being and for which we sometimes pay little attention. The three speakers tonight, they were not randomly selected. They were chosen because of their boldness, their fearlessness in speaking, the way they dissected issues. We decided to bring them on this discussion. And the moderator for this evening, some of you all would have already heard him and would be familiar with him. Dr. Kerry Rai, Sumisa Rai is our moderator. And Kerry is a leadership and management consultant, or expert. He holds a doctorate in government from UWI St. Augustine. He's a former lecturer at that university. And he's also a former lecturer at the Trinidad and Tobago Hospitality and Tourism Institute. He held senior management and strategic leadership positions in organizations such as the National Commission for Self-Help, the Police Service Commission, Secretariat, and the Trinidad and Tobago Postal Corporation. As a consultant, he provided services in strategic planning and organization development for many organizations, particularly in the Southern Caribbean. And our technical support facilitator is Mr. Edison Polasi. And Edison is an IT expert. He provides all our technical support, not just for this session, but previous sessions. He is retired from the banking industry, but is very much active in sharing his vast knowledge and helping his friends and others to learn this infotech components, install infrastructure, and maintain their operating systems. Tonight, is the client host of Zoom, and we appreciate it and thank him very much for allowing us to use this platform to communicate, this interactive platform. So over to you, Kerry, and you will tell us the ground rules and introduce the speakers.
Thank you very much, Dr. Tilok Singh. I say we call Jerome because he's very rootsy. But so tonight, and thanks Eddie, Mr. Polasi, who is a dear friend of mine. And we have been trying to get this type of dialogue going since last year. So we're really happy that we can get this far. We hope to build on this. Tonight we have three presenters. Mr. Roger McFarlane, who will go first, Mr. Atkins Vidal, and Ms. Ruel McIntosh. Our wrap-up, after our presenters present their views, we will have a discussion session, and then wrap-up and appreciations will be done by Dr. Sean McGuire. So move into the discussion, and how we would is that each presenter will have 10 to 15 minutes, so we have a little flexibility. They make their presentations. We want to ask participants to hold their questions till after we have completed the session, And then in organized and regulated format, we can ask the questions. You can also put the questions up on the group chat. So we could, on the chat, sorry, on the chat. So we can attend to those questions in some sort of sequence and do justice to what you're asking. So I want to introduce at this point Mr. Roger McFarlane. Roger, Roger is born in Trinidad and Tobago, studied in the USA, graduated with a degree in computer information technology. He is employed at UE and has been there for over 10 years. Active as a trade unionist, he was the president of the OWTU ATSS staff um, grouping in 2016. He is the lead singer of an acoustic fusion band called Tyrannistas. Am I pronouncing that right?
Renaissance, correct.
Which was recently signed with Audio Maze, one of the leading independent world music labels in Europe. So Roger is not here to sing for us tonight, but you know he could throw in a few lines if you so wish. So I hand over to Roger. Sorry, it's now 8:40 by my clock, and therefore Roger, the floor is yours in the next 10 to 15 minutes. Thank you and welcome.
Well, thank you so much for the introduction. I want to say good night to everyone who is out there and who is listening. And thanks very much for the invitation to be a part of this panel. I feel very honored to be among all of you tonight. As we know, we are, on the cusp of Emancipation Day and all that it means to us as a country. And in looking at the word and looking at the aspect of us at this point in time, I would also say it's amazing to know how we have come through, even as a country, through this period. And in the year 2021, the dynamics that's going on worldwide and stuff that is bringing us together and even to this place tonight. So, I really sense that if no other point in time, we should really be a nation that could not just reflect on the past, because there's a lot to say about the past, look at our present, and also see where we go forward as we go forward, how we move as a nation as we go forward. It's a time of introspection, reflection, and also moving forward. So the emancipation time for me, it means a lot. It means a lot to me as a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago. Emancipation, what does it mean? There are so many layers to that. Studying in America and also being, a citizen of Trinidad and Tobago, being involved in music and seeing the various aspects of it and how music has also affected and given us insight into who we are as Trinidadians, given us the ability to communicate how we feel, gave us the ability to reach within ourselves and to express ourselves to our neighbor and to see where that voice could take us in the future, not only as a Trinidadian, but as the Caribbean. Emancipation tells me that we need to be, it's a word that exhibits freedom. We at one point in time, as you know, we were under a different system. And when we became, when we use the word emancipate, as Bob Marley says, emancipate yourself from mental slavery. because no one but yourself can free your mind. It's not just the idea of saying, well, there were a bunch of, or a certain sect of people who came on ships that came to a certain country, and we are here to establish ourselves. It's also another dimension of us as a people freeing ourselves mentally, freeing ourselves in the sense of establishing ourselves in this country and being free in that regard, to become, to be, to not just see ourselves as the past, but to see ourselves in the present and to articulate a future. And in order to do that, we truly must be free. We truly must be able to not just glean from the past, but to look forward. And in order to do that, as I said, we of ourselves must be able to free our minds, to allow ourselves to want to evolve, to want to connect, to want to become more than where we are right now. And the only way that we can do that, in my mind, is not seeing ourselves, as I said, through the lens of the past, but the minute we have come together to see ourselves now as to what do we do as a people, how do we move forward as a people. And sometimes every time I discuss that, every time I put that forward, every time I say, even as a union leader, let's work together, let's look at those causes and issues within our country, and let's have that conversation. There's always this and pull as to which voice we need to hear, who we need to hear, who we really. And sometimes when you address that, some people say, well, the reason why we're not moving forward, the reason why we're not doing what we're supposed to do, the reason why we're not in that place is because of colonialism. Colonialism have us in this certain frame of mind. Colonialism have us not being able to work together and to see how far we can go. Colonialism have us down, and we haven't evolved from that. And yes, in a sense, we are a young country. We have, I would say, give or take 50 years or so. And so the excuse sometimes in certain forums is that, well, we are young, and there's a lot of colonial baggage that is still there. So in order for us to truly evolve and to work together as Trinidadians and to see ourselves through that lens and to be free from all other encumbrances from the past to make us truly be who we are, it seems as if it's this process, this ongoing process. And the political arena sometimes, in a lot of ways, sometimes doesn't help in that regard. And that's a discussion that I am willing to have. That's a discussion also that I'm willing to look at. Because in the political realm, just as how we have a situation in the United States right now, where we have Republicans, Democrats, and it seems to be this sort of tug of war that's going on within the social media area and within different frameworks within the news and so forth. It tells me that even in America, this process is still going on. The ability to truly have that identity. What does it mean to be Trinidadian? What does it mean as an individual to move forward? What does it mean? What is that consciousness as a Trinidadian, how are we linked? Are we linked? Or are we still in compartments, but we still trying to figure out what it is? What is that feeling? What is that emotion? How does it come together? Yes, we were built through Eric Williams, through that nationalistic pride. We have our national anthem, we have the songs that we play, the parades that we do, we have our calypso, we know about our beaches, we know about, all those, the pitch league, the things that we can identify as, as a Trinidadian, we could say, yes, I know of these things. They're a part of me. If I was to take a plane and I go America, I could say, I feel more at home saying I'm Trinidadian because now there's all these other layers and I want to identify myself as a Trinidadian. And if somebody asks me about Trinidad, I could give them all the wonderful things and aspects about it. But here in Trinidad, what does it mean when we put aside those things of what does that mean to me as an individual? And sometimes being a national seeing it through a nationalistic lens is sometimes difficult because I think politically sometimes those voices make those stalwart images of who we are frayed a bit. And this is why I'm here to have that discussion. Emancipation is important. Being a person who sees themselves as a national of Trinidad and Tobago is also important. But also knowing the present, seeing that now, what does that mean for the future? How do we take this understanding and really transform Trinidad into the place that is not just our home, but something that could be the leader for the next century? And to me, that is a discussion I am willing to have. I am willing to have that kind of discourse. A lot of times I feel that in carving that way forward, like for example, I'm into music, and as the moderator said, I'm not here to sing tonight. But as being into music, our band brings together all these different elements of tassa, we have steel pan, we have berimbau, we have the acoustic guitar, we have voice. We bring all these elements together to make one harmony, to create one vision, to create one piece of music that we could take and bring to the world. And so far we've done that with some limited success within the UK. But at the same time, my heart is here and is open to not just music, not just seeing us in one vein, but also to see what does that mean as a country? How do we perceive ourselves? One person came to me and said, well, I see us, within the framework of oil. I see us in the framework of this, but how are we as a country gearing towards that independence and that emancipation? How are we becoming and unfolding to be a better nation? Can we take our skills and talents and forge ahead, whether it's in different fields, whether it's in music, whether it's in art, whether it's in film, whether it's in agriculture, whether it's in dance, whether it's in electronics? Why can't we be the next, I would say, pioneer? We have people who have done it in the past. We've had leaders in the past. We've had leaders who have brought us to certain points, even within the trade union system, within trade unionism. We have that. We have had people who have taken us from one area, one point to the next, who have brought us out, where we had workers who weren't earning proper wages, etc. And we've had leaders who have taken us from one point to the next. But where are we heading to the future as a nation and as a people? Are we looking forward to being the next best, thing? Are we looking towards transforming the Caribbean, looking forward to making our beaches the best beaches that are out there? Are we there to see ourselves as agricultural leaders in this hemisphere? Are we here to take the industries by storm and use our education, use the stuff that we have known from in the past and make this country something great towards the future?
Roger, I need to interject. I want to ask you to wrap up because your 15 minutes is kind of up.
Yeah, so sorry, yeah, but at the same time, I was trying to get all that within just a short time frame, because I believe that there are things as a people, there are things as a nation that the year 2021, we can move forward in that direction, but at the same time, understanding our past, looking at our present, and having that goal and vision and seeing ourselves fully capable to take it to the next level. And that is my passion and my goal to see happen within within Trinidad and Tobago.
Thank you very much, Roger. When during the discussion, you of course can make further comments, but I want to thank you very much for your submission. We want to move on to the next presenter, Mr. Atkins Vidal, and he's a lecturer in the Studies Department at the Cipriani College of Labor and Cooperative Studies. He obtained both a master's degree and a bachelor's degree in history from the University of the West Indies. He is also the coordinator of the Elmer Francois Institute for Research and Debate at the college. Mr. Vidal has spent most of his adult life as both a community and political activist. He's a former president of the Trinidad Youth Council, 2007 to 2009, and a former executive member of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions and NGOs. He held the post of General Secretary in 2012 of the Federation of Independent Trade Unions. Mr. Vidal represented Trinidad and Tobago's civil society at several forums as both a delegate and presenter throughout the Latin American and Caribbean region, including Suriname, Curacao, Brazil, Nicaragua, Ecuador, Cuba, Venezuela, and several Caribbean countries. He continues to write on social issues and assist civil society networks in whichever way possible. So I give you the Vidal and remind him he has 10 to 15 minutes to present. Thank you.
Hi, good evening. Good evening to everyone. Thank you very much to Jerome for inviting me to be part of this discussion. And good evening, of course, to the other panelists and all those persons who are listening. So I want to, in the 10 minutes, really try to speak to a few things. And I want to start off with the where I think Roger would have spoken about Bob Marley and his emancipate yourself from mental slavery. And I want to link that and perhaps tie my presentation into that. Because one of the things that I always say and my own analysis of that song is that Bob Marley isn't talking to the people that we think he's speaking to. You know, more often than not, when people use that phrase from the song, they think that we're talking about the downtrodden who somehow have some mental incapacity that is preventing them from being more productive in society, preventing them from being employed, preventing them from being more successful. And it is somehow some internal thing. And I want to suggest that in fact, it is those of us who have become successful in this kind of environment, who have become successful in this plantation, who lose sight of the fact that we are still on our plantation. And so that it is us who have gotten success in these spaces who need to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery if we in fact want to move on in to the future that Roger speaks about. So I wanna construct my answer in that way, or my contribution in that way. So when I think of that, I go back to when we talk about emancipation. What are we talking about in 1834, 38, as the case may be? We're talking about the emancipation of the enslaved population. We're not talking about the emancipation of the colonies. We're not talking about the emancipation of Trinidad, the emancipation of Tobago as a whole society. We're talking about the emancipation of a component of the society. You have to be very clear on that. So therefore, if we're dealing with a country like Trinidad, because Tobago has a significantly different history to Trinidad. So if you're dealing with Trinidad, you end up in a situation where 50% of the population is enslaved at the point of emancipation and 50% is free. So that the notion of emancipation actually has almost no bearing on 50% of the population. That is significant because it then affects how we treat with each other going forward. So what does emancipation mean for those persons who are in fact enslaved, and what do we understand by that? Well, understanding what is happening during the period of enslavement, there are issues around economics. So you're not in control of your earnings and your wages in the way that a free person would be. You don't own property, you don't own land, you don't have those things. Politically, you're not involved in any kind of decision-making process. That is taken away from you. You're not part of the government. You have no possibility or chance to be part of the government. And then socially and culturally, you're exercised from the rest of society. So whatever structures and systems exist in the society, whether they be health facilities, education, all of those things, they're not there for you. So we're talking the period of enslavement and what happens in enslavement. And all of that is possible because of the nature of the society, which is a plantation that has to be part of the discussion when you're talking about eradicating or dealing with emancipation. So let's talk about that plantation structure. And because of that plantation structure, which creates a particular type of economic framework, creates a particular type of political framework, when the indentured Indians come into Trinidad, you find an argument being put forward that it is a new form of slavery. And the reason for that is not because indentureship and slavery are the same, it's because they operate in the same plantation. And so because they operate on the same plantation, there's a lot of room for similarities. There's a lot of room for a continuation of the attitude towards labor that would have prevailed or existed during the period of enslavement. And this is where my main point is. And this is something that I when I teach and I talk about the attitude towards labor, that is a key problem with us in terms of understanding emancipation. The attitude towards that enslaved labor, the reality is, in my view, that has not changed. Up to today, we look at those who are at the lowest rung of the labor market and we treat them as subhuman. We have little to no respect for them. And we don't understand that exploitation is wrong, fundamentally. We don't understand that. We seem not to be concerned with exploitation at all. And I'm not surprised by that because, again, Trinidad and Tobago as a colony, Trinidad and Tobago as a plantation and as a slave society, 50% of our population was free. And there are examples of the free population, in particular the free Black middle class at the time, writing to the colonial authorities in the 1820s to have laws amended so that their lives could be better, because they were facing racism and they felt that the colonial authorities were treating them as if they were part of the enslaved population. So they wrote to save themselves, and their writing and lobbying had nothing to do with wanting slavery abolished. So in other words, there's a large pocket of African people who look like the enslaved population, who have absolutely no problem with slavery, and who did not form part of the lobby against slavery. So that when in 2021, we have persons who have no issue with exploitation of workers at the lower end, I am not at all surprised, because that is the nature of the society that we have not treated with, because we have not understood emancipation as a process. We've seen it simply as an event. So emancipation was this day, it happened, great. So somehow, by some magic wand, the society transformed itself from the 31st of July to the 2nd of August. So in those 3 days, you magically had two totally different societies. And when you think of it like that, you realize how crazy that notion is. So what have we done to actually treat with those fundamental issues that created this exploitative society? And as I said, my focus really is about the idea of labor and treatment of labor. That because of that's my area of research. How do we treat with labor? So we understand, for example, we don't live in a vacuum. So Trinidad and Tobago is subjected to international pressure, and all of us, we're now exposed to what is happening elsewhere around the world. How does that affect how we treat with our domestic situations? It forces us sometimes, incorrectly so in my view, to introduce attitudes and so on that are not relevant to our spaces. What do I mean by that? Let me give you a concrete example with the trade union movement and understanding labor in a Caribbean context. So I'm going a little broader than Trinidad and Tobago with this. In Europe and in North America, when the trade union movement is created, it is created out of shifts in modes of production. So when you have the introduction of industrial capitalism and the mode of production, you go into factories, workers then have to organize themselves to protect themselves from the owners of capital. And they form these trade unions or these solidarity organizations on the shop floors. And that's how you end up with shop stewards. All right, so that's why you have shop stewards, because it's born, the trade union movement is born out in factory. In the Caribbean, between 1838 and 1840, these combination laws are passed which prevent and actually ban the formation of trade unions. So it's not until you get to the point of the 1930s that we actually start to see the creation of trade unions. And where are these trade unions created? They're not created from the shop floor, you know. Our trade unions are born in the streets of the Caribbean territories, whether it is Trinidad and Tobago, whether it is Barbados, whether it is Jamaica. The trade unions come from the street. And therefore, what they represent and what they ought to be focused on is not just industrial relations issues, but they are a manifestation of an attempt to transform the society into what it can be. And that process would have been started prior to emancipation. That is what your slave rebellions would have been about. That's what the enslaved Africans would have been fighting for. And their fight to transform the society is not just about them, because every battle that they won and every battle that workers won since has not been just to the benefit of workers, but has been to the benefit of all in the society. So as much as the middle class, whether they were African or Indian in the 1920s, 1919, and the early 20th century, no matter how much they fought to have a sane elections, it's not until the workers in 1919 have that first major strike that you have the Wood Commission come into the region, and you have this transformation, and you have the introduction of a limited adult franchise. So it is the struggle of the workers, because they are most affected by the nature of the society. Their struggle is central, in my view, and key to the transformation of the plantation into some semblance of a post-emancipation society. And we're not even going to talk about independence because that's a whole different kettle of fish here, right? But just in terms of transforming the society from that plantation society that was so exploitative, that you allowed and that you're comfortable with the period of enslavement. I saw a person in the chat there say, oh, Trinidad only had slavery for 50 years, and that's absolutely true. But that doesn't mean that those 50 years were less horrific than 100 somewhere else. And there are peculiarities about all 50 that don't exist in other places that requires some additional interpretations. I think that with that there, I think I've just come to about 14 minutes. So I'm going to stop there. And definitely when we have question and answers, I'll contribute further. Thanks.
Oh, thank you. Thank you, Vidal, for your time management and some very significant points made as well. I truly appreciate those points. So our next presenter is a young lady, bright young lady. Her name is Roel McIntosh. Turn on your mic, Roel. Roel is a recent graduate of the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine. She completed a bachelor's degree in history with gained first-class honors. Roel is an alumna of Naparima Girls High School. She continuously strives for holistic development, having been involved in various extracurricular pursuits such as javelin, volleyball, music, and community service. This has further cultivated her passion for history and the arts and our own unique Caribbean culture. She participated in the Trinidad and Tobago National Panorama Competition on several occasions and has also worked as an assistant music teacher for the Brea, hope I pronounced that right, Associates Music School for several years. These two opportunities allowed her to appreciate our rich culture more fervently, embracing her Afro-Caribbean heritage and aiding her academic journey. So it's really nice to have the perspective of a woman, a young woman at that, on this session. So it's over to you, Roel.
Good evening, everyone. I had mentioned in the chat earlier, but I want to just say it again. It's both a pleasure and an honor to be here tonight, sorry. Firstly, I just want to say, Mr. Vidal, I hope I'm pronouncing that properly, but he mentioned emancipation being more than just a moment and being a process. And I think it's really interesting that he mentioned that because that's exactly what I was planning to stress today. But nevertheless, I will continue based off of what Sumasa said earlier. I am a young person, and so I intend to contribute my youth perspective to this discussion. And I really want to focus on the question, are we emancipated now, currently in contemporary times? And in order to answer that question, we need to understand what is emancipation, what does it mean to be emancipated? And in terms of its pure definition, to be emancipated is to be free from restraint, to be free from control, or the power of another person or another authority, and it is to be free from bondage. So using this definition, I want to look at emancipation, that moment of emancipation for the African community back in 1834 and more effectively in 1838. But I also want to look at the process of emancipation, which in my opinion is an ongoing one. And so that's how this discussion is going to be divided. So on August 1st, 1834, and effectively from 1838, the legal status of Africans was changed from that of slave to freed. From this point onwards, we, the African population, were to be emancipated because technically we were no longer enslaved in bondage. However, if we return to the definition that I established earlier on, it becomes evident that the process of emancipation, and by emancipation, I'm talking economic, ideological, psychological, social, cultural emancipation, it's evident that this was not complete and it continues to remain incomplete. Um, After the Emancipation Act, there was, for example, the Vagrancy Act, which was employed by the our white masters, not our, the white masters, the colonial power to bottleneck and force the African population back to the plantations. You had, for example, landowners as well were raising the rates of land to extremely exorbitant prices in order to prevent further independence of the African population. And, we have several more examples of legal measures being taken to control and restrict and restrain the African population in spite of the passing of the Emancipation Act. And so this clearly then is a form of institutionalized, oppression, discrimination, and bondage. This ensure that the Africans remain under the control of the European authority and influence. So that was historically. I want to talk about present day now in modern times. Trinidad and Tobago, we have changed again our status, and in this case, political status, diplomatic status, from that of colony to independent nation. However, the imperial relationship and influence has been so deeply entrenched that our status as totally emancipated, quite frankly, it remains questionable. And I want to talk about the ideological relationship, mental relationship, in order to answer this question. So back in 2019, Dr. the Honorable Keith Rowley, he noted the rising levels of crime amongst the Black youth, and I did mention that I will be talking from a youth perspective. Um, he said that the people of African descent were not doing as well as we expected. In 2015, the crime rate was 30.65%. This crime rate and also our policing culture in turn is most definitely a remnant of colonial legacy. Just as in the past, the police, which then would have been white people, used aggression and force to control the African population. In contemporary times, it has been noted that our police, despite being, locals and no longer this foreign white base, they are of us, they are our fellow Black man, and yet still they continue to both believe in, reinforce, and act upon the colonial ideologies that was previously established, and those ideologies being that the Black man is a savage, that we are unruly, and that we are criminal. Additionally, the youth employ crime as a tool to solve the current poverty issue, which is another product of institutionalized discrimination and oppression. They use this as a tool because they too believe in the ideology left behind by the white man. Therefore, I think we can see that the African community seems to be suffering from some kind of collective low self-esteem. And I know that Mr. Roger, he did mention that sometimes we tend to be very focused on just looking at the past and looking through the lens of the past. But I think it's very, very important to note and really understand just how damaging the past colonial ideological relationship was, and just how deeply rooted it is, and it continues to be perpetuated, you know, throughout in modern times. Um, Having said all this, the African population, it's evident that we are not in the same position that we were in before. This is more so, this becomes, you know, it's clearer, even more so for the youth today. This suggests that emancipation, like I said, is more than a moment, it is an ongoing process. And it also shows that the relationship between being emancipated and the action of emancipating is an interdependent one. If we look back as recently as last year, where we had the Black Lives Matter movement, that really, that, you know, it was a American centered movement. However, we saw that expanding outwards globally and taking on a larger scale. And we actually saw it emerging into a large scale social discourse locally on race, Black status, and Black consciousness. Not just in terms of the colonial legacies, because we did see discussion on the imperial relationship, but we had very, very active, very public discussion, visible discussion on racism, racial discourse amongst the general public, and not just within the academic space. And I think this is very important because Mr. Atkins, you know, he did mention that sometimes the more academic or the so-called intellectual community, we tend to feel that because we've gone through the traditional educational systems, and because we have this term of academic or intellectual, that we are automatically um, emancipated, and we tend to keep this discourse to ourselves and not really expand it outwards. However, we saw this kind of discourse happening on a public stage last year, and that was a result of the interconnectedness. I think the pandemic definitely had a part to play in terms of us being home and with the internet, social media, of course. But I want to note we need to really understand and appreciate the significance of that discourse happening. Um, Arguably, I would say we have not observed a strong public social discourse on race and racism and oppression and discrimination since, I would say, the Black Power movement, really. Um, this happening, this event, this incident showed to me at least that in terms of psychological and ideological emancipation, we are becoming liberated, at least to a degree. And it shows then that this ideological and psychological emancipation in turn enables us, it provides us with the tools to continue the process of emancipation. Um, and so again, also I kind of want to add also, he had mentioned post-emancipation, seeing as I established that frankly, emancipation is a process that we are still in, it kind of makes the term post-emancipation, you know, also it's something that we could question as well, because emancipation has not yet ended. We are still in that process of emancipation. Um, and so I kind of just want to end off with saying that it becomes clear to me, at least, that answering the question of if we are really emancipated in Trinidad and Tobago, it's a very difficult one to answer. It's not a clear-cut one to answer. Um, I would say both yes and no. To an extent, we are emancipated, but we have so much further to go. Um, and But discussions like this, having the public discourse as well, that will provide us with the tools needed to really actively try to further emancipate ourselves, and emancipate the population, and emancipate, the nation as a whole. And yeah, so thank you. That would be my contribution for today.
Thank you, Ruel, for your contribution. We could give her a round of applause. Very brave and so on. Very forthright. So we're going to move into the discussion session, but I want to recognize the attendance of a couple people. Zina Atwaru, Reggie Siraj, Akila Holder, NR, I'm not sure what is her name, but that's what you have up. Karine Sherman. Someone seemed to have a little problem in changing the name. I have them here. Can you rename, if possible? Then we have Lyndon, Portia, and Nigel Bihari, who is an old Hillview boy as Edison and myself. So welcome, Nigel. So we're going to move into the discussion, but let me just kind of summarize what was shared by the three presenters. Mr. McFarlane went first. He spoke about emancipation and moving forward. What does it mean? He mentioned Bob Marley's lyrics from the tune Redemption Song, pitfalls of colonialism and us. In the US, he mentioned this conflict, competition between the Republicans and the Democrats, what it means to be Trinidadian. He referred to Eric Williams, and he pointed out the role that music has played, and he finished up with asking the question, really, where are we going from 2021 onwards? Mr. Vidal again referred to Marley's Redemption Song, the lyrics of that particular song, speaking to the issue of emancipate yourselves from mental slavery and so on. He said the song spoke to a particular people, not necessarily the downtrodden, but successful people who were still on a plantation or on the plantation. And Reggie had made a point, and he mentioned Reggie's point, emancipation had no bearing on 50% of the population, but what impact it had to those who were enslaved. And he mentioned the plantation structure, the economics and the political framework, which was also mentioned by Ruel. He spoke about indentureship, and speaking about indentureship, he mentioned that it was operated on the same plantation system that slavery operated. He spoke about the attitude to our people, people on the lowest rung being treated with a measure of disrespect. Exploitation is wrong. And then he went into a little historical discourse, pointing out that the free Black middle class actually wrote to the colonial authorities at one point in time, petitioning for their rights not to be trampled. And he went into understanding labor and how labor came into being, the contribution of labor to the environment, and that these trade union movements were not created on the shop floor, but on the streets, which was a manifestation of an attempt to transform the society in a particular way. He spoke about the first major strike in 1919, and then you had transformation of the plantation system to some semblance of a societal setting. I think he also mentioned the initial rights to vote, though restricted in the 1920s and 1930s. Then we had Ruel. She mentioned emancipation as a process, a point that Vidal had made, and she spoke about the economic, social, and cultural dimensions. Very informative. She mentioned the Emancipation Act and the Vagrancy Act and what the attempts were being made or still corral the population and ensuring the status quo prevailed. Change of political and diplomatic status, the cultural, colonial system still there. And then we have the issue of the ideological relationship, such as the issue of crime and the rate of crime. I think it was 26.5% she mentioned in 2019. And that the attitude and behavior of the police, even though they were no longer colonial, they were of our own, how they continue to behave and reinforce the colonial ideologies. And an ideology which spoke to the Black man being a savage and having to be controlled. And that the Black youths especially were reacting to certain things. She summed up that part of the discourse by saying that the African communities suffer from a sense of low self-esteem, and the Afro population has to move in a different direction. I move my notes here, right? And emancipation being more than a moment. Emancipation is based on interdependence and is a process. And then she mentioned a bit about the Black Lives Movement, that American movement that went abroad and even impacted on us here, and re-raised, if I could use that term, that issue of Black consciousness. And she spoke about the visible discussions on racial discourse and racial discrimination, the psychological and ideological emancipation of some liberation or some people feeling the start of liberation, and that it provides tools to continue. And she commented on the post-emancipation term that Mr. Vidal mentioned. But she concluded by saying that we're still in the emancipation process. So I just thought I should just recap what the presenter said, and I now open the floor for your contributions. Yes, please be brief with the questions or comments, and we have about 60 minutes. So we have to listen to the seminar, so you have about 30 to 45 minutes to continue. So the floor is open.
Okay, my question is to Miss McIntosh. Could you all hear me good?
Yeah.
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Can you identify yourself, please? Just identify yourself.
My name is Amar Rambadan.
Right.
Now, with respect to you are saying that emancipation is an ongoing process. What would be the end requirements or goals to be achieved for emancipation to be complete? What in your mind would be those goals?
Quite frankly, given the depth of the damage and the existing relationships, I do not think emancipation is necessarily a process with a definitive end. However, as close to it as possible, in my opinion, in my view, would be, a breakdown and revamping of the social institutional systems in such a way that the relationships between oppressor and oppressed is not as unequal. It's not, and also a certain level of collective consciousness to, awakening to the fact that this relationship is visible, it's present, and then with collective consciousness, you have collective activism, actively working to change the systems, breaking it up. But quite honestly, like I said, I don't think emancipation is necessarily something that has a definitive end
Thank you.
Um,
Ruel.
that can
okay,
answer your
thank
question.
you.
Anyone else?
Yes, I guess Mr.
Yes.
Atkins is a trade unionist. Is that so? I mean, he spoke like a trade unionist. I was also a trade unionist. In case you don't know, I was the president of the Electronic Media Union for many years. So he kind of connected to me. So I just want to say racism in Trinidad, well, emancipation is not really an African problem in Trinidad. Trinidadian Africans was not subjected to racism or emancipation, slavery, like the rest of the Caribbean. What caused the upsurge in the difference in Trinidad with racism as with Indians and Africans in terms of emancipation is really when, I don't want to be political, but it will be controversial, when the PNM brought in voters in 1958. They were from the islands, and the islands is who experienced um, slavery in a bigger way than Trinidad. So they would have felt the effects of slavery. But the Africans in Trinidad, as I mentioned, is less than 50 years. And many Africans in Trinidad owned white Irish slaves. Hence, you find in Trinidad, there, just like Barbados, there's a vast majority of red-skinned Africans who are really mixed Irish because they're mixed in the plantations. So those who just figure they're high colored is really mixed with Irish. So it is the point Mr. Atkins was making earlier on concerning the emancipation and how they think about it and they think they're higher than anybody else. I just want to go to the BLM movement. Now, Trinidad is just import things from the United States. We don't have a Black Lives Movement problem here because the government is an African government from since 1956. The problem with Africans in Trinidad is not Trinidadian Africans from the slavery days. The problem with Africans in Trinidad is Africans who and the offsprings of those who were imported in 1957 and 1958. They are the offspring because they brought in immigration on its own creates problems. With all these strict immigration problems in Canada and America, there's still a problem with the Sri Lankan, the whoever comes in, African, Haitian, whatever, they have problems. Far less for us who had no restrictions, anybody come in. So plenty bandits and criminals came in. This is a fact. They came in to get away from the islands. So when the parents bring them to vote, they came into Trinidad. So they went into those communities to be voter banks. So it had nothing to do with African and race, you know. It had to do with politics and economics. So they decided here what PNM giving me free thing. We just getting paid to vote. We cannot get free thing. And they pass it on to the children. We get free house. We get everything free. So it's not Trinidad and Africa, you know. Is small island Africa that exported to all those places like Bonaire, Maloney, all about, Gun Hill, and all the places. They caused the problem. So it's not a racial problem. It was an economic problem and a political problem that the PNM created, and this is a fact. So that is my view. Mr. Atkins could come in because he was closer to my arrangement than anybody else.
Thank you, Reggie. Very controversial, but some
True.
valid as well.
Hi. Which union did you say you were with again?
Electronic Media Union that was with the radio stations and TV stations and so on.
Okay. All right. Well, I just wanna. I mean, I don't want to get into all of that now, but I know we'll end up with some time. But I just want to challenge you a few things I have said. One, by the time, well, Trinidad and Tobago, not Tobago, Trinidad. Trinidad starts its plantation experience really in 1783 with the settler population. At that point in time, what happens is that you have the French coming in to a Spanish environment. The French come in, and when the French come in, it's white plantation, it's white owners of enslaved population, it's black owners, and you have your mulattoes. So that's the first introduction of the so-called half-white African into Trinidad and Tobago. That's the first instance in the 1783. By the time you get around to 1834, there is a group of white indentured persons in the Caribbean. They're not enslaved, they're indentured, which is different. And they exist throughout the region because there's the issue of, there's an argument for shortage of labor and so on, which starts. So we have, in fact, we have Chinese coming in as early as 1806, 1807, coming in as indentured laborers. So you have, in the British system in particular, you had a lot of white indentures working alongside the Africans during the period of enslavement. So yes, you did have whites on the plantations, but they weren't enslaved, they were indentured. The other thing I wanna challenge a little bit has to do with how we understand racism. Now, there are several tiers of racism. So the tier during the period of enslavement is white over brown over black. Why do I argue that that exists and that is intrinsic in the society? Because people who, the darker your skin gets, the more problematic the society is for you, and you get treated differently. And that has nothing to do, that is not about African versus Indian dynamic. That African versus Indian dynamic is an introduced phenomenon by the British to separate the two races. And that's my position, and I could defend that position. What you have is you have institutional racism, so that by the time you get to independence, where the people who are coming into power look like us, the reality is that that system is so entrenched that it doesn't matter if they look like us. Walter Rodney puts it like this, and I'll just end with this point. Walter Rodney says, if the system itself is corrupt, if the system is exploitative, if the system is racist, and you don't change the system, it doesn't matter who's running it. You will impose those same things on your people. So whether it is an Indian person who's running the show, they will impose the same exploitative, racist attitudes on their own people, because that is how the system is designed. If it is an African person running the show, same thing. That's why we had 1970. So in 1970, we can't argue that the white population in Trinidad didn't have and hold particular privileges above and beyond the rest of us. I mean, beyond people who look like me. From TSTT, places like TSTT having one entrance for black workers and next entrance for white workers, from the Pigeon Point being exclusively white, from the role that the country club had in Trinidad. And the thing is that I think we have to move beyond feeling bad about the things that are part of our history. We have to confront them and speak about them and deal with them head on, in my view. And it's not about anybody feeling guilty or feeling bad, because if we have to shape this country, and we're talking CLR James here now, it has to be the African, the Indian, the so-called Trini whites, the Syrians, the Lebanese, or everybody, because we can't turn the country on its side and shake off who we don't want to deal with. So if we all have to deal with everybody, we have to find a way for all of these components and constituent parts of Trinidad and Tobago to work together. And part of that is confronting all of the historical animosities, all of the historical aggressions that we have, and finding a way to treat with them with a level of honesty that allows us to move forward. We will never get to a point where everybody likes everybody. That's utopian, that's crazy. But we could get to a point where we understand how to work with each other in an effective way.
Thank you.
Very good contribution, Mr. Atkins.
Yeah.
Institutional racism is based on a system of systemic racism, or vice versa. And we are educated, brought up to live in that type of reality. Unfortunately, our education systems have not addressed efficiently and effectively this problem. And this is where we hope that resistance as a discussion forum could make a dent into these realities. Yes, next one.
So go ahead. I can come in after.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that, I agree that racism does exist in Trinidad and Tobago, and we have an institutional racism problem. But I think we also need to look at the flip side, which is we don't just need to fix those institutions, but we also need, I think Black people in particular need to fix their view of themselves and not cry too much, well, the man is doing this, or the white man is doing this to me. Because when we look, the reality is some Black people have progressed financially and where education is concerned. So it's, in spite of the fact that we have institutional racism, some Blacks have progressed. What is responsible for that? Part of it is that there are some Blacks in society who, for whatever reason, want to hold on to I guess, their anger, or they want to cry foul all the time. And I also think part of the problem is that some Blacks just don't know who they are. They're not sure who to be, right? So we have the race problem, and then we have Blacks behaving in a particular way because they think Blacks are supposed to behave a particular way. And there are some writers in society who are responsible for that when they push things like cultural relativism and cultural moralism. Blacks should hold on to these particular. I think that's part of the problem. I'm not saying it's a sole problem. I'm saying it's part of the problem and something we need to address. And yes, racism does get swept under the carpet a lot, and you can't deal with something that you don't confront. And one of the reasons we still have race in the country, why it continues to be a problem, is the fact that politicians use it to their advantage, right? They continue to use it to their advantage. So I just wanted to make that observation.
Thank
I
you
was
very
saying,
much, Shakila.
I just want to make a point. She was talking about institutional racism against Blacks. The institutional racism is against the Indo-Trinidad population. Because what happens, the PN was in power for so many years, they were able to entrench their people there. So therefore, the institutional racism is not against Blacks, not against Trinidadian Blacks. What we see in poverty and crime is really people who came in from the islands. It was people who came in undocumented and so on as a voter bank. They are the ones who create the crime. If you check UV, one time this guy, what's his name, David Mohammed, mentioned that if you want to know who controls UV, check the guild. Since 2003, the guild has been controlled by Africans. So to go with his point, that means the majority of the students at UV are Africans, Afro-Trinidadians. Likewise, Cipriani College, likewise UTT, check the guild. So therefore, saying that Blacks are underachieving is a lie. It is a narrative that's been created by certain people. The fact is, if 90% of the government is African, 90% of the police, 90% of the public service, how the hell are Blacks not underachieving? That is my point. They are not underachieving. It has been a narrative that's been projected for many years, a false narrative. Anybody could answer that. Huh?
Okay, I didn't say that they're underachieving. I did make the point that a lot of Blacks have been able to progress financially.
Not a lot. 90%. 90% of the boards.
Hold on,
90% of all the state boards.
Reggie, hold on.
No, I'm just saying 90% on the state board. So how come some are achieving? All are achieving. 90% are achieving. Trinidadian Blacks are achieving.
Reggie.
Yes, no, I'm saying. It's a lively discussion. It had to be lively. I was in the media, so I make it lively. You can't have it dead. It had to be lively.
But you have to give other people a chance to respond. Yes, Akila, hold on, Nisha. Do you want to respond?
Could I interject? Yeah. Could I just say something?
Yes.
This is why, unlike the other two presenters, I try to be a little more holistic in my ideology with Trinidad and Tobago. Because for so long, we have been in this maze of, as one of the presenters was talking about, how we pattern the colonial plantation sort of working. And even though we have been replaced, we have replaced that system as bodies, how we look doesn't really matter anymore because we still put out the same sort of structural demise to our own. It doesn't matter, as the other presenter was saying, that you take anyone from UE, you take anyone on the street, you take anyone, and you put them in any plateau of power, and they still do the same structural damage. It doesn't matter how much they make on a daily basis. It doesn't matter how much, what class they are. They are not free here. They still have the same sort of structural status that they want to impose as how it used to be. And what I am saying is that as a people, whether you're from whatever country, whatever area, wherever you are within this structure, if we are not conscious of that, if we don't as a people come together and realize that as Trinidadians, we need to move this thing forward, then we are going to be in a problem. This is a situation where we as Trinidadians will be headed in a dangerous situation if we as Trinidadians don't come together. And that I think is the point that it was being made by my trade unionist friend.
Thank you, Roger. I just want Akila to just finalize her response before she was interrupted. Akila.
Yes, right. So it's not that I didn't say that Blacks are underachieving. I just made those various points. And just to respond, I have noticed in society that a lot of East Indians hold a lot of positions of power. So even if the government in power is a Black government, because of how the indentured system worked, where and apart from holding power, you have East Indians with a lot of property as well, right? Because of advantages they would have had when they were no longer indentured servants. So that's something we also have to consider.
All right, thank you. Lisha, you wanted to make a comment?
Yes. Hi, good night, everybody. I mean, first of all, I want to thank this group for what I would consider to be a very open, frank, emotionally sincere, intellectual discourse. And I certainly hope that we could continue to have more of these kinds of conversations because they are so desperately needed in Trinidad and Tobago.
You want to
So
put
anytime-
on camera to see your face? Right?
Oh, God.
Reggie. Hold on, Reggie.
No, I like to speak to a face. I don't want to speak to a blank screen.
Reggie, I am on Facebook with millions of photos. So please check me out on Facebook.
I want to see what you look like now.
Reggie,
Expressing yourself.
stop it, please. You should continue. Don't
Yes,
worry.
but yes,
Stop it. I want
certainly,
to see
this was
Lisha.
an
What she looks
excellent
like.
conversation. Now, I do have, first of all three presentations were very thought-provoking, and I appreciated them. And I do have questions for each of the presenters. So, Mr. McFarlane, my question for you would have been, you mentioned that politics and colonialism keep us, and I'm saying us because I am not about African and Indian and Chinese and Venezuelan, etc. I'm about us as one people. So, Mr. McFarlane, you said that our politics and colonialism keep us back from being fully emancipated. So my question for you would be, what are your recommendations for us moving forward from the state of oppression that has been created by politics and colonialism? Right?
The question is to Mr. McFarlane, right?
That's Mr. McFarlane. Should I just mention the other two questions as well?
Please do.
Right. Okay. So, Mr. Vidal, I hope I got the name correct. Now, if I quote you, accurately, you said that successful people need to emancipate themselves. And generally, success is a sign of prosperity and happiness. So are you saying then that some people are happy not being emancipated and in that state of slavery? So that would be my question. And for Ms. McIntosh, right? You mentioned a lot of things. You said that we are not a we, and I'm saying we because I'm not talking about Africans, Indians. I'm talking about we, the people of Trinidad and Tobago, right? That we're not ideologically and psychologically emancipated. You mentioned in particular that African people suffer from low esteem. And emancipation is something that requires an interdependent solution. I want to know, how can other races help the African race to become more emancipated? Like, what are your thoughts on that? So that would be my 3 questions. But again, I want to just really commend you all. I loved this discussion.
Thank
So
you very
thanks for that.
much. Thank you very much, Alicia. And we look
Yes.
forward to your contributions. So, future
Uh-huh.
contributions. McFarlane.
I was.
Sorry, I
Huh?
heard someone speaking.
Yeah. Alicia asked a question concerning politics and colonialism, keeping us oppressed. Did you recall the question? You could recall the question?
Yeah, well, first of all, I would say it begins with us as a people, and when I mean the African community. Once we have, and as was mentioned, this discussion is good, it's healthy. The African community must establish within the frameworks and structures within themselves what it is they are about. How do they counteract this in a sort of meaningful way? And that, to me, is connecting with each other within the communities, enlightening each other, empowering each other, and by doing so, create a nationalistic viewpoint of Trinidad and Tobago at the same time. But that needs to come from the communities, these need to come from the networks, the youth networks within the fabric of Trinidad and Tobago. The second,
go ahead.
The second thing is, even in examining that and looking at those structures, we need to have a nationalistic viewpoint on whether that has to come from the University of the West Indies, whether that has to come from different educational institutions. It must be pushed from that perspective, as well as communities and families and those frameworks within the community. And no longer must we see ourselves as a separate entity and people. Yes, there have been historical problems and issues along the way. I am not saying no. But at the same time, for us to move forward, I see that we need to have the churches involved. We need to have the community involved. We need to have certain political structures involved that will encourage us to enlighten that population to move forward in that regard.
Oh, thank you. Mr. Vidal, can I ask you to be brief? Because we run out of time, basically, but the host told me we could have maybe a 5.
Because there are a few things I would have liked to address too, but I suppose in a different time. So let me just answer the question, and I hopefully I could get in one comment. So what do I mean by the state of emancipation, and that the emancipation yourself really refers to those who are successful? And it has to do with whether you agree or not that about the kind of society that you live in. So for example, let's go on extreme society and Nazi Germany. Nazi Germany, Hitler was actually able to improve the economic performance of the German economy during his time as the premier. That is historical fact. Now, does that mean that the persons who were successful and the businesses that expanded during Nazi Germany should beat their chest and be proud that they were successful during that period? And the answer is no, you'd find none of them doing that. And in the same way, we have to, in my view, and this is my position, and I think there are many people who hold that position, that we're in a society that is exploitative. We're in a society that is still very, very colonial, very plantation. It is a capitalist society that sees the exploitation of the mass as its main objective. And therefore, to be successful in that kind of environment should not be used to endorse the system and then say, well, the system is good and therefore something is wrong with everybody else. Because the flip side of that question is, and this goes to Akila's point about the successful Africans now. There were successful Africans in 1783, in 1789, in 1820s, during the period of slavery. There were successful Africans who had money, who held position in society, but slavery existed. So does the existence of successful people mean that the system is good? And the answer to that is no, right? We have
Thank you.
to find a way.
I really need to interject.
Yeah,
Thank
and
you very much.
that is my, yeah.
I can
Yeah.
make a point, Mr. Moderator. I agree with Mr. Atkins also in what he's saying.
Reggie,
point.
hold. Just hold a minute, please. I need for Ms. McIntosh to just make a quick point in response to the question asked. And Lutch wanted to say something, as well as Akeelia wanted to ask or add something quickly. And then,
I forget, so I out.
Hi, G'day. I'd just like to, I think it was Alicia who had asked me a question. Firstly, I want to just say that we need to be careful that in our quest to have a national identity, that we don't completely disregard our racial or ethnic cultural identities as well, because there are nuances that are very important. They were important before and they're important now. But with regards to how other groups can assist the African community in terms of emancipation, the issue is that we have institutional systemic racism and systemic issues. And so these systems, even if there's not necessarily like a visible white man or anything here with like a stick over our back, these systems are kind of acting like that. And so we need consciousness, not just within the African community, but in amongst the other racial groups as well, ethnic groups. And with consciousness in the exact same way comes activism. They need to help us break down these systems. I just want to comment that I feel as though a lot of people throughout this discussion have been kind of dismissing the severity of institutionalized systemic racism. It is not a case of, oh, I mean, yeah, race is, yes, there's race, but Africans choosing not to do this and Africans choosing not to do that and to believe certain things. Africans are believing certain things because there's a legacy mental damage, psychological damage that has been continuously perpetuated by the system. The system reinforces certain thinking, certain philosophies. And yes, of course, there are examples of certain Africans rising above these systems and working against against them and sacrificing a lot to be the exception. But the existence of exceptional Africans doesn't change the fact that this institutionalized racism is in place. It doesn't change the fact that these systems are still inherently against the African community, the African population. And while yes, most definitely within our Trinidad and Tobago, of course, it's not only African alone who have been oppressed, because we had the Indian community as well. But I think we are being very dismissive. I think we are not trying to really understand how nuances work. And yeah, so I just kind of want to, put more importance on that fact to really understand. It's a system we're going against. It's not an individual issue. It's not, necessarily a choice kind of thing.
thank you, Ruel.
Mr. Moderator,
Lutch,
answer Miss.
Yes.
Miss-
Are you
Reggie,
hearing
hold on,
me?
please. Yes, Lutch, go ahead.
Are you hearing me?
Yes, I am. Yes, we are.
Okay, so I just want to remind and revisit the broader context, or the broad context in which we are deliberating, right? And it's a very brief comment to remind us about that. Are we really in order to continue the exploitation of human labor according to the rules of engagement under capitalist economics, its rulings elite shifted from chattel slavery to wage slavery which obtains to this day fundamentally and dominatingly. This is the factor that determines the power arrangement in the society. So the issue here is, as we have left chattel slavery and we are now in wage slavery, all these matters must be seen in that context. Thank you.
Thank you. Claire, can you make your quick comment?
That's
And
okay, Akila, yes. I just wanted to add basically to what I said. Now, my pastor made the point some months ago that where a person is today is more a reflection of their thought process than it is their past circumstances. And that is true, you know, for some in the Black community. We also have the issue where we have a lot of Black leaders, whether trade union leaders, whether Black activist leaders, who continue to decry or who continue to push the narrative that the system alone is responsible. And I think if you're not careful with your speech, you can send the wrong message and give the Blacks who tend to hold on to their anger the idea that, you know, you're right to think that way. The next thing is, I took note of Ruel's point about the nuances, and that we can't dismiss the fact that there's racism, institutional racism. I get all of that, but we have to be careful because society, this world, and now Trinidad and Tobago, you know, when America sneezes, they say the world catches a cold. I think we catch pneumonia because we're pushing this narrative now where the individual is less responsible for themselves, and the community always has, the community is always at fault. They mantra and different feminist groups, they do it when you talk about if a woman gets raped or she's abused, and you know, if you raise the question, well, didn't she see a red flag? They go down your throat. It has nothing to do with the woman, it has everything to do. No, as individuals, we have some responsibility in the course of our lives. So just to go back to my original point, we need to be careful how we frame the discussion. Yes, we have racism, we have race problems, but we also have to think about how some Blacks in the community see themselves and their failure to think the right way. That is an issue. That's it.
thank you very much. Zena, do you have a question? Okay. I have a question here from Nigel Barry, sorry, who asks, what happened to the Black Caucus movement? I have another question as well from Amar, who asking for us to identify an example of institutional racism. I hope that's the question you wanted to ask, Amar. Is it? Vidas Chomian, thank you. So, and I think Ruela attempted, or in her discourse, perhaps provided some insight. Reggie, I know you have been waiting in the queue for quite a long while.
Was I excommunicated from the group? I just wonder from Mr. Moderator.
You were not excommunicated. Please ask a question or make a statement.
No, I think it's Ms. McIntosh was making a point of institutional systemic racism. And she's making the point that is against the Afro-Trinidadian, which is, to my view, to my opinion, is wrong, totally wrong. She's following the narrative of the political narrative that Africans are being disadvantaged. It's a cultural problem in Trinidad. Indians, when they're poor and they're starving, they sit inside the house and eat rice and salt and don't say nothing because of shame that they never know they have no food. But the Afro-Trinidadian culture, they will come outside, hey, we have no food. But they have a 50-inch TV, a 75-inch TV, are being very practical, very, very practical. But the Indian would have nothing. I grew up like that. I grew up with my mother not having anything, and now I just tell my children I eat rice and ketchup and rice and milk when I come from school. And it's when I get big, I realize but I had nothing else to give me. But we didn't make big noise. So now is a difference, right? I walked into college 5 miles away from my home, right? It was not a problem then because I considered, okay, this is how it is. So when is Ms. McIntosh talking about institutional racism, systemic racism, she's missing the point. She's missing the point. And not to be controversial, but in these kind of forums is where things come out. Ideas is a marketplace of ideas that comes out. And it needs people to stand up and say certain things. And sometimes we hide because of culture, because of religion, we hide. We say this is karma. We're supposed to be catch we ass. This is we karma. We have to catch we ass. God says so.
Reggie, I need to interject because we really run out of time.
No, I just say, you know, the Zoom operator tell me half time. The thing is,
no, he can't
I'm
tell
just
you that.
saying, I'm saying that
Reggie, go on, I'm asking you. I'm asking you, please. Thank you.
No, this will have the conversation live with either Alicia Dory.
No, yeah,
the
but
conversation now.
Yeah,
if I wasn't here, she wouldn't like it. If I wasn't here, she wouldn't like it.
But
right?
we run out of time, and
We
perhaps is an issue that we need to take up at another point in time, and have different views on what you're saying. I don't think we're judging you what you're saying is wrong.
Oh, you see, I have
we're
lots
sharing
to
views.
say. I have lots to say.
Yeah,
I'm
but
not a presenter.
yes, but we have
the
time.
only
We have a
presenter
time
tonight,
schedule.
The only presenter tonight that I would endorse is Atkins. He's a very he knows across the board. Maybe
Reggie,
because we are
why are you continuing? Please.
All right, continue.
Thank you.
I don't want to disrupt your meeting. I don't want to disrupt your session.
I think, ladies and gentlemen, is there anyone else that have a burning question? We're really out of time at this point in time. We're 10 minutes over.
Could I ask Reggie a question?
Sure.
I would like to ask Reggie if he feels the UNC is a nationalistic party.
I don't think I want to go down.
I want to ask you that question. Is the PNM a nationalistic party? Is the PNM a nationalistic party? You answer that question.
Gentlemen,
you answer that question. You answer it. You answer it. You answer it.
Gentlemen,
answer the question.
Reggie,
You answer the question.
I'm asking you, is the UNC a nationalistic party?
Roger,
if I have the time, I would answer. I want 2 minutes. Let me answer for 2 minutes.
No.
Let him answer. I want 1 minute.
Please.
Let me answer in 1 minute.
No, please. No, we are not.
I think.
So,
I like
Mose, can you?
1 minute. I'll answer him in 1 minute.
Can you silence?
Seconds. Give me 30 seconds to answer him. Give me 30 seconds to answer him.
Can you
Are
silence?
you afraid, Mr. Morita, because you are Indian, you're afraid to answer the question? Are you hiding behind your race? Are you afraid like the UNC? I will answer it. Are you afraid like Pandey? Are you afraid like Kamala? Let me answer the freaking question.
Please.
Let me answer the freaking question.
Please,
Let me answer it, Mr. Moderator. Don't play the ass. Let me answer the question.
Mr. Zoom host.
Let me answer the question. Don't play shit with me, ass. Let me answer the question.
We are not going down. We are not going down that road. We are not going down that road.
I just
apologize, Mr. McFarlane. We are not going down that road.
That's okay. I understand completely.
Yeah.
Right?
Moderator, could I get a 30 seconds, please?
Yes.
30 seconds.
Yeah, I want to just make a quick point here, right? There's some things that have been said tonight that, quite frankly, in my view,
let me hide. Don't hide behind yourself. Let me answer the question. Don't hide.
A lot of the.
Do not hide. Let me answer the question. Before you talk, let me answer the question. 30 seconds.
Yeah,
30 seconds on the question.
Let me
ask
speak.
me a question.
Yeah, I'll let you could speak after. Let me just get 30 seconds.
No, the moderator is
let me just get 30 seconds now. Yeah, my point is that I think a lot of what we've heard tonight is a reflection of some of the challenges of the wider society.
Yes, it is.
I think that spaces like this have to be created. I'm not afraid to answer any of the questions. I'll tell you, I disagree in my bones with a lot of what Akila Holder had to say. I disagree with a lot of that in my bones. But I'm not afraid of the conversation because I think the conversations have to be had because we have to understand where people get some of these ideas from, where they get some of their challenges from. And I want to say as well that we talk about, and we try to run from these conversations, you know. So we talk about all of these one, we talk about Trinidadian.
Atkins, 30 seconds up.
Yeah, right.
I have to cut you.
Because I have to cut you, please. We have more time. Mr. Morita, Zoom operator say we have time. The Zoom
Reggie, hold on. Reggie,
let me answer the guy now. It is not for you to off.
Yeah, you have 30 seconds answer to respond.
Right. He asked if the USA National Party, it is a national party than the PNM. I'll tell him why. Because check the board since 1956 and all the thing. Check it and you'll see. There was not a Hindu Indian in the board in any position from 1956 to 1986. There was also not a single Indian
Reggie, you're 30 seconds
in
up.
anybody. No,
Reggie,
you're
you're
cutting
30
me because you're
seconds up.
frightened because I blasted moderator. You're frightened. You are
But
afraid because you're Indian
you could say
moderator.
that.
You are afraid to
could
be
say that.
accused of being racist. Do not be afraid. Do not be afraid to be a racist.
That
Don't be
has
stupid.
nothing-
Stand up for your freaking rights. Don't be
That has
stupid,
nothing to do with this forum.
Mr. Moderator. Don't be stupid. Don't be dotish like Pandey and Kamla. Stand up for your freaking rights.
May I say something?
Yes.
I just want to say something, right? And I will take 10 seconds, right? I am a new member of the UNC. Yes, it is a national party. That's all I have to say.
Ladies and gentlemen, this discussion is not about politics per se, in terms of party politics.
No,
and we will, Mr. McFarlane,
I was going to
Mr.
answer
McFarlane
him. I
and
was going
Reggie,
to answer him.
we are not going down that road.
That's the point that I'm
Mr.
trying to
McFarlane, we are not going down that road.
No, I'm just saying.
Asking you and Reggie to conduct yourselves. That is our next forum. That is our next session. It's something we could put on the agenda to discuss, but we're not going to discuss
No,
that.
but that's the point. The point it has nothing to do with PNM or UNC. The point I'm trying to make
You
is
asked a question. You asked a question.
Yes, I did.
Right, and I was trying to answer you, and the moderator cut me off. The moderator said the next session.
Mr. McFarlane, if you continue it, Mr. McFarlane, please, I'm asking you, reserve.
Okay, no problem.
This banter
Reserve
is
for
not
what?
going to get us anywhere.
Right?
Right?
About the next day, I want to answer Mr. McFarlane.
No, you had 30 seconds.
I didn't answer him.
Ladies and gentlemen, we are out of time. I would like to bring on Mr. Sean Niguay.
And the Zoom already cut me off.
Yeah, I would like to bring on Mr. Sean Niguay to thanks and to wrap up the session. Mr. Niguay is a senior lecturer at the College of Science, Technology, and Applied Arts of Trinidad and Tobago, COSAT. He earned a PhD in history from the University of the West Indies with his dissertation on the history of commercial banking in Trinidad between 1837 to 1992. His research interests include business and legal history, church history, and Caribbean cultural heritage. I now give you Mr. Dr. Sean Niguay.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Good evening, everybody. Well, where do I start? I think tonight's discussion, no doubt, is a very important one, since it was concerned with an assessment of our individual freedoms and liberties, and more particularly to see how far we have advanced or progressed as a collective group of people. I think the discussion tonight was a very healthy one, and it really offered a lot of different perspectives. One of the things I have to mention is that I think the role of this group maybe in the future would be to look at contesting the narrative of history in Trinidad and Tobago. History has traditionally been written from certain perspectives. Initially, it was written from a very European perspective. And as nationalism emerged and we became independent, a nationalistic history emerged. And I think the people in this group are really part of a new generation of historians who will have to really seek a new perspective that embraces not one or the other, but we'll have to really look at various perspectives and try to bring them all together, okay? History as a process, I think that came up tonight, and I think Emancipation Day, as we celebrate tomorrow, it is really a period of introspection for many of us. And I think it is important because slavery really lives on in all of us. Even though we, celebrated more than 200 years, how many years ago now? Oh, 500 years ago at least, emancipation. Am I making sense here? I have to check my dates. 300 years? 300 years, right? Something like that. Even though so much time has passed, the legacy of slavery continues to remain very important for many of us because it is part of what we will call in history, the living memory, all right, of these persons of African descent or enslaved persons. And although I heard somebody mention, I think it was Atkins that spoke, and he said that emancipation is really the main concern of the enslaved population. I think that has to really be challenged, given that we are a new generation of people, and I think we have to move on from that perspective, because I think emancipation also concerns everybody in the society. All of us have a certain amount of baggage that we carry, all right? Europeans, Indians, and I think you may have seen some of that narrative tonight. And what we really need to do is to really rewrite the history from a more collective or more maybe ecumenical perspective. Okay, so I don't want to spend too much time, but I'm supposed to thank people. Let me first thank Roger for his McFarlane, for his perspective. I think he was very open-minded, and I think this is what we have to do. He says that initially started to talk about the lens of the past. We should not see ourselves through the lens of the past, but we should see ourselves in the present. And I think as people living in this period of time, our role here is not really to remain in the past, but really to figure out how we may construct a new identity and to move beyond, the system that had been created under colonialism. So I really want to thank him for his discussion. And I think he has been very, open-minded. Yeah. Mr. Vidal, I think what we have to appreciate with his perspective this evening is that he tried to negotiate it with the plantation economy theory, which is a theory proposed by Lloyd Best. Yeah. And the legacy of slavery continues through this system. It's an economic system. And basically what it did is to allow the metropolitan countries abroad to control the society, and the control not only dealt with economics, but it also had a social element to it, all right? And I really like the point that he raised that, slavery continues, and we could see it, particularly when we look at the exploitative practices that operate in the labor system. And I thought he might have gone on to talk about the role of the labor or the trade unions, which I find to be, if I may say, declining somewhat or losing strength because of the current configuration of how workers operate. Today, we no longer, have permanent jobs in the government. A lot of the jobs today are contractually operated. And I think this will, the lack of permanence, or lack of being a permanent worker really raises some serious concerns about work and slavery, And then the last speaker, Ruel McIntosh, I think for, a newly graduated history major, I think I must be extremely proud about how she articulated here tonight. And I think it is very important how she tried to look at the question of identity, and also how slavery continues to remain as part of our Caribbean legacy in the Caribbean. And she touched on things like criminality, how crime is really an offshoot of, Caribbean slavery. And then she went on to talk about emancipation being a process. And I think I would have to agree that emancipation is a process. Maybe it does not have a definitive end, but I think what we really need to accomplish at the end will be to try to resolve, how we in Trinidad and Tobago could treat each other. And I think the solution to the problem is very simple. How do we establish grounds for mutual respect amongst all persons in Trinidad and Tobago? And how do we enshrine this with principles of equity, fairness, and justice? And just lastly, I think I have to do, so I think this discussion was very healthy, and I think it allows us to really express ourselves. I also have to thank Reggie, because I believe he speaks from the perspective of Trevor Sudama, who has a very, if I may classify it at this point, and I think it's important to classify it, from a very Indo-Trinidadian perspective. And it's not a perspective that should be discounted. But what we need to do in the future is to contest these perspectives, to see to what extent they are true. And there may be some validity, but we must also see, you know, that in society, even though something may be true to a certain degree, it is only in degrees. It does not hold true for the majority of the population. And I think I want to, you know, make that very clear, that history is about rewriting the history, and the journey of these new academics or historians or the role of UE would be to write a perspective that is more encompassing, but one that is more just. And I think that is what we would have to do. Let me finally just, you know, thank the organizers of the, I just want to thank the organizers of this seminar series. I think it's a very important seminar series. I'd just like to give credit to Dr. Jerome Tiloxing. All right. I'd also like to give thanks to Kerry from Suha. How do I say this? All right, Dr. Kerry, I don't want to rye. Am I getting the name right?
That's good.
Yes.
Yeah, that's
Yes,
good. That's
sorry.
good.
And yeah, I think you did a very good job of moderating. You know, these topics that we deal with are very emotive, and I think you did a very good job at, you know, handling the various discussions that we had. And finally, before we leave, I'd really like to thank the audience for joining us in such an important discussion here this evening. These discussions will really help Trinidad and Tobago move forward. And I think it's these discussions which help us to contest the narrative of history which we have that will really reshape how Trinidad and Tobago progresses in the future. So I'd like to thank everyone.
Thank you very much, Dr. Negwai. Raji, I hope you have left, but I want to thank you for your attempts to introduce an issue that we need to discuss in the society. And McFarlane as well. We are in a competition, political competition amongst different organizations. And very often when we try to have sober discourses on societal, historical, even political issues that are non-party based, the party politics always comes in. And yes, we have to discuss that. Tonight was not a place for that discussion, but we will take your views into consideration, and perhaps in the near future, as a topic for discussion, we will raise and introduce the issue of party politics in Trinidad and Tobago, the pluses and the negatives of that. I want to thank all of you for your attendance and your contributions, and we look forward to seeing you next month when we would have a similar topic or issue to address. Might be on education, and might be on the budget. It might be on the issue of a failed state and good governance or something of that nature. So good night. Thank you very much, Edison, for facilitating and hosting us tonight. God bless you all.
1 point, Mr. Moderator. I don't know if I'll be there to be controversial next time to have it lively.
You have 5 seconds.
I don't know if I'll be controversial next time to be lively, but I'll try my best.
All right. Good night, all. Bye.
All right, good night, everybody.
Good night, good night.
Good night.
Good night.